study on banks. And what she found was that of all these banks, and I'm summarizing, so like, Alyssa, if you want to like punch me for it, I'm sorry. But she did this study and found that most of them use the same providers to write their APIs. They're using the same repeated code, and they were subject to IDORs, or insecure direct object reference, as a definition. And you might ask yourself, what is an IDOR? She explained it well by saying, imagine Dom and I both have two different cars. I'm driving a 79 Pinto, and Dom's driving a brand new Lamborghini. And I pull up right before him at the valet desk, and I hand over my keys, and I get my ticket, and it says 107. And Dom comes in 108 and walks in. Both walk into the party. At some point, I walk around the corner with a magic marker and change it to 108 on my ticket, hand it back, and they hand me the Lamborghini. That is a methodology of abuse against APIs called an IDOR. And I'm definitely summarizing. So like real security people just like throw stuff at me. It's totally fine. But the point is, in the same kind of fashion, you see a central service provider that provides so many of these things to 60 different banks and credit unions, or I guess it's mostly credit unions, is again, that same kind of central point of failure, that same kind of central thing. And to bring it back to Alyssa's study, she found that most of those banks were subject to the ability to change amounts, to create accounts, to change names, to manipulate systems, all kinds of things just by emulating an Android app and stepping in between that. So just point is, in this case, we have ransomware group that has attacked a central place to that. And to your point, Dom, brings it instantly to the feeling of that cybersecurity impact. You said it well before, with banks not being able to close loans, the inability in title companies to maybe get a title assurance done. All that stuff stopped the real estate market for a while. And if you're in that market and you're impacted by it, that really sucks. Same thing here with the victims of these community banks and credit unions using some central party that hasn't gotten their update cadence right without casting stones.
Interesting thing about this target is you can, I think if it was a little bit larger, we would possibly be having like a run on the banks conversation, right? If you cannot transact with your bank because it's broken, what is your reaction, right? That's not great. So it's an interesting one, and these attack surfaces scare me a little bit more than some of the other attack surfaces we've seen in the past. But like, people weren't closing on their homes, and there was one where the bank actually did close on a loan and funded it. So that person was officially on the hook for a home they hadn't bought yet. So there's a lot of potential impact to be had with these types of attacks. And another moral of the story is patch your stuff, right? There is a Citrix patch out.
Patch your stuff. Deployed. 100%.
All right, what do we have next?
Next one is CISA, actually talking about the Adobe ColdFusion exploit, CVE 2023-26360, to gain initial access to government services, right? So this is stating that that's how initial access is being gained. So the security issue allows executing arbitrary code on servers running Adobe ColdFusion 2018 update 15 and older, right? So let's just end 2021 update 5 and earlier. It was exploited as a 0 day before Adobe fixed it in mid-March. Let's just make sure that sinks in. I'm going to pause for a sec. Mid-March. Just want to make sure that didn't land some other like August in your head or something.
That's the third month of the
right
year.
Yeah, that's number 3 if we're counting
12.
at home, folks, of 12. That's the third 12.
Yeah,
so we're getting much closer to that. But basically says both servers were running outdated versions of the software and vulnerable to these CVEs. CISA says threat actors leveraged the vulnerability to drop malware using HTTP post commands, which is the way they manipulated directory path with ColdFusion. First incident was recorded on June 26th. So let's just say that they had now 3 months to patch that and had not. Now, I think this is the core problem, whatever that causation is. And there's a lot of different audience out there watching right now, and I'd love for you to comment on what your thoughts are on where those causations are. But ultimately, this is saying that they did this. They were able to do this to 2 government servers. In both cases, the attacks were detected and blocked before the intruders were able to exfil data or move laterally. And the compromised assets were removed from crucial networks within 24 hours. CISA's analysis categorized the attacks as reconnaissance efforts. However, it's unknown if the same threat actors behind both intrusions. But the points to take away from this that we've already hit is that in both incidents, MDE alerted the potential exploitation with an Adobe ColdFusion vulnerability.
Shout out.
That's an interesting shout out to MDE. Well played, Microsoft. I love that. So very cool. But yeah, let's talk about this, Dom. So again, patch your stuff seems to be coming up again in this conversation. And it is 2 things that I wanted to cover. So first is obviously that patch your stuff. But the second is really, I love that CISA is getting more and more of a voice. We're getting more and more data from them. We're getting to see this real flexing of muscles of talking about these challenges from CISA, not just on this, but also some of the most exploited work they've been doing lately with showing the most exploited vulnerabilities. All of this stuff's coming out of that information sharing from IC3 and that information sharing that we're advocating for so much. So, Dom, anything to add on this one besides the regular? Come on, y'all, let's get our stuff
Man, I forgot
patched.
ColdFusion existed. I'm not gonna lie, and I didn't
No
know
doubt.
people still used it. But
Federal
CISSP puts
government.
out what they call the KEV, or the known exploited vulnerability list. And the way the regulation is written for federal cybersecurity, I think it's 7 days, might be 10 days. But once something hits the KEV list, it has to be patched legally within a certain time frame. Like CISA is the keeper of that. It has to get done. So heads will roll for this, but I want to point out that KEV is a publicly available list. You could just Google for it, and you can use that as a source of intelligence to understand what's a known exploited vulnerability. And it's pretty interesting to watch. You can sort it by date added, and it'll be, an exploit from 2017 made the list today. So if you really want to understand the state of patching in federal
That's
and
not
other
possible,
places,
Dom. That's not possible. People have
it's
patched. There's no
impossible.
way somebody's using. This isn't possible. It's impossible. That's the way I'm going to state it. There's no way this is possible. You're blowing my mind here. All right. You're not wrong, though. People need to patch. It's ridiculous. All right. So let's move on so I don't cry here. All right. Next article, which I might maybe cry. New Bluetooth flaw lets hackers, threat actors, let's call it threat actors. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Hacker News. Just throwing your name out there. Take over Android, Linux, macOS, and iOS devices, which is a huge breadth, right? This is a very interesting breadth of this. A critical Bluetooth security flaw could be exploited by threat actors to take control of Android, Linux, macOS devices. Track the CVE 2023-458-866. The issue relates to a case of authentication bypass. So having to be able to bypass that authentication allows them to connect to susceptible devices and inject keystrokes as if they were an HID, right, or a human interface device. Multiple Bluetooth stacks have authentication bypass vulnerabilities that permit the attacker to connect to a discoverable host without user confirmation and inject keystrokes. So let's zoom out of this. We don't have to beat this to death, Dom. We don't have to spend a whole time reading all this. It's again, patch your stuff. Like at the end of the day, as now, I didn't know our whole thematic conversation was going to be patch your stuff, but it seems to be. Because in this case, when you're talking about it, what is this really that as a user can do with this conversation? What can a user do when you know there's this major vulnerability? Nothing until it's time to apply a patch. And that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
you could, however,
Bluetooth. That was my reaction.
Let's say you could turn off Bluetooth, which is also a pretty good idea usually anyway, unless you are using things that need to connect via Bluetooth. Same thing with wireless. And that goes back to being a little more hygienic. But anything else to add to this, Tom?
Oh, man. Yeah, patch your stuff. Also with these ones, Bluetooth has been an issue since Bluetooth came out. Like, it's more secure by a lot today than it used to be. But I understand that, like, Bluetooth is always a risk. My watch is a Bluetooth watch, and I leave it on, and I accept that risk. But I also have different controls on my devices to understand if something weird's like I run an endpoint protection device or software on my phone. But understand that Bluetooth vulnerabilities aren't new by any stretch of the imagination. So I am a little bit in the camp of, if you're not using it, and I just happen to be using it most of the time, you should turn it off, right? Same with Wi-Fi. There's a joke about don't go to DEF CON with your Wi-Fi on, and I would argue take a burner phone, but
right.
In general life, like if you don't need Wi-Fi, turn off the Wi-Fi, right? And just limit that potential surface you have.
Mario Alexander in the audience on LinkedIn said, "Is patch your stuff the security's equivalent to it's always DNS?" Yes, you wouldn't be materially wrong. Like from a mathematics perspective, it's probably definitely people had a vuln and then they left it open for a long time and people used it against you. Yes, you're probably not wrong. That's hilarious. All right, and the other thing I wanted to add to this is, you see this proliferation of tools and getting them in the hands. It isn't that hard now to say, oh, cool, I have this working POC or proof of concept, and it works as a code to actually bypass authentication. And from what I understand on this, it sounds like they're connecting as a keyboard or as a mouse or as some external human interface device that's now connected, like an audio headset would have been, or things to that nature. But once you're connected to that point, you've made this easier because there's a lot more people with flipper zeros in their pocket. There's a lot more people that would be willing to play with this. So you may see interesting behavior happen of people abusing it just for fun purposes, I guess I'd say, as well, just like you see now with the annoying Bluetooth association pop up. The other thing to add to Bluetooth in general is Bluetooth is also part of kind of the nature of how it works when you look at some of these relay attacks against cars, right? Some of the
Yeah.
attacks they're using is taking a Bluetooth signal and then repeating it closer to the car, as if the car, the fob was in your pocket next to the car, right? For that signal strength perspective. And so there's all kinds of stuff with Bluetooth, but I think the best takeaway is patch your stuff. And if you don't use the service, turn it off. That goes well beyond Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or anything. It's RDP. Why would you leave it on if you're not using it? Those kind of things. So, all right, last one. I think
Second to last one.
second to last. It's fair.
It's a long news day.
You go for it here, buddy.
All right,
This is
Microsoft warns
Cactus
of
ransomware.
malvertising scheme spreading Cactus ransomware, and we got to stop coming up with these dumb names. But I digress. It's warned of a new wave of Cactus ransomware attacks that leverage malvertising lures. We'll dive into malvertising in a second. To deploy Danabot as an additional access server. Danabot infections led to hands-on keyboard activity by ransomware operator Storm0216 or Twisted Spider or Unk2198, depending on what you prefer to call them, culminating in the deployment of Cactus ransomware.
I'm an Unk fan.
That's a good name. So I think we get back out of this one. It is a good article. You should read it. It's got some good nerdy bits in it. Yeah, man, let's talk about malvertising, because I think it doesn't get as much attention.
That's the one here. Yeah. Well, what is
malvertising?
I'll go second.
Let's cover that first. So malvertising, one is one of the easiest attacks to pull off, believe it or not. Like, you can get your infected ads through Google AdWords or AdSense, whatever they call it, pretty easily, and we've seen that. But malvertising is essentially it's a drive-by type attack. I get your website or the website you're looking at to display an ad that loads some code. It might take advantage of a 0-day, might take advantage of a known vulnerable exploit, but at a base level, most people that are doing malvertising are doing it to steal the traffic away from the website, collect some phony affiliate revenue, or they'll lead it into, the fake browser updates and those type of attacks. But this one does seem to be a drive-by deployment of remote access tools, and then hands-on keyboard real work being done by threat actors here.
Correct. Yeah, and I think the whole concept, though, of malvertisement is this challenge of know your customer rule, right? And what I mean by that is, at the end of the day, you have this onus that's never been realized of large providers not having to know their customer. Oh, we made best efforts to filter out malware. We made best efforts to get rid of disinformation. You see this play out a lot. We won't delve into the full topic, but certainly I think the challenge is it is in the financial best interest of a company that sells ads to take ad revenue. And you put yourself in a position where they don't have a very good separation of duties efforts to want them to deny that revenue. And so as long as they can make best efforts of saying we didn't see malware there, then they're good. But to your point, drive-by downloads and malware don't often manifest themselves that way. They might require a certain user agent string. They might require certain race conditions for them to fire. And so they get by those checks. You could actually have a non-malicious site up for checking. And once the ad goes live, you could change to a different site. You could inject the code posthumously of that decision. And there's just so many ways around it, I think, that it's not in their best interest to fix it. And it does help malware delivery. And when you think about it, I've got a buddy of mine, Briton, that's all he does is chase down victims of redline malware where info stealers have been injected so that people could steal and access those creds. But in this case, we had, and the other piece I'll reflect on is we have like a whole children's storybook of names. Like we wander down Twisted Cactus Way over to Twisted Spider Lane. And like we've got all these amazingly horrible names. They're so good for a comic book. I digress.
Just want to say for the record, we came up with that. We're going to write that book.
We're writing the book. It's going to be a children's novel for sure. Yeah.
I think it's going to be
Lion,
great.
the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
All right, we got one more. And
But yeah,
I'm
it is.
seeing some comments on YouTube that we may have an audio issue. I wanted to bring that to the crew in case they're not seeing the YouTube comments. But we'll keep going, and if needed, we'll be stopped or get a recording or what have you. But just heads up on YouTube. I did want to add one thing to this, is that one, yes, this is a real possibility. So as much as we're giggling about the ridiculousness of that statement, it is a true statement. And I also want to call out, you called it the fifth domain of war. And it is the fifth domain of war, but that doesn't mean it will be a wartime activity, right? It is genuinely possible that private threat actor group, Twisted Pterodactyl or whatever we're going to call them, does a
Twisted Pterodactyl hasn't been invented yet.
That succeeds. Yeah,
and that's really not alliteration because you have a P in front of the T because it's pterodactyl. So,
it's audio alliteration. It's fine.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I'm good with it.
So for me, I think it's more likely than any of the other domains of warfare playing out, particularly in the developed world, right? So it could absolutely be a private attack by a private threat actor group, whatever they're going to be called that day.
Activism. Yeah.
So there is sound advice in having the flashlight, but I think it's a silly statement to make as a government without other commentary about cybersecurity.
Well, the rest of it would be, if you don't patch your stuff, get a torch. Right, that you didn't remember. There's a whole thematic aspect of this, right?
Yeah, so it's fair. Patch your stuff or buy a flashlight.
Yeah, but in reality, joking aside, that's why it's so easy for a private citizen actor to potentially do that. Right, is you have seen the woeful state of disrepair of critical infrastructure and its protection in the United States. I mean, that's Dragos's entire mission statement, right? And they've been on a tirade for 5 years to try to even get us to some passable state of cybersecurity.
CISSP's entire mission statement, like, it's in their agency name, right? Like, they are the Infrastructure Security Agency.
100%.
So it's a big problem.
Tangent aside.
It's time to hear from Robin.
We do a whole show on it. It's time to get Robin in. Let's hear from her. She's smarter than us anyway.
Everybody's excited about emerging technologies. And of course, the big one that's on the table now is AI, right? And it's very interesting because there was a recent incident with Microsoft, and it had to do with AI of their internal data. There are companies and there are services, and especially the AI, that's pulling in large sets of data in order to perform those wonderful things we like ChatGPT responses, right? But what happens when we're not adequately putting the right security controls in place to match the risk that come with integrating these new technologies? Because I hear more and more people talking about AI. I don't hear a lot of people talking about the security and the controls that are being put in place to go along with that. So we've got to think emerging technologies have to have emerging controls. As we're leveling up our tools, we've got to level up our security. The two go hand in hand. We don't want to wait until something happens and then everybody's running around like crazy. We gotta be proactive. And I know people don't want to even think about this because it's so exciting. All of this new technology is so exciting, and we're putting all this money into it, and it's gonna deliver all of these wonderful results. And the bad guys are sitting back waiting. They're sitting back waiting for all this technology to be integrated, like I got the thermostat that's on my network, and the doorbell, and all this other kind of stuff, and these Internet of Things that people can hack into. They're waiting for all of these technologies to be mass adopted, because that gives them a lot of ways to do some really bad things. So just because nothing's happened major now, don't think that it's not being planned. It's not in the works. You think about it. Sometimes a threat will be realized way down the line, but it was actually put in place much early in the process. A piece of malicious code or something can just be sitting, waiting. And they can be very patient. It could be months waiting for the right moment for that event to be triggered. So while we're doing all of this early adoption, we need to be thinking about, do we have the right controls in place should something go wrong or should somebody try to exploit something? It's the cost of being in business these days. We have to put security into our budget. It costs to be safe.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and just acknowledge that we are having some systems issues. We decided that there was a vulnerability we were going to go ahead and patch. And so we're patching live. We may be able to switch over to our guests. So we're going to try it out now. All right. We're going to hopefully bring on Jake, and it's going to go well. There we are. Man, it works. All right. It's all right. We're good.
We made it.
It's
fire drill complete.
Yes, fire drill complete. Steve, how you feeling down there, buddy? You doing all right? Just had to check in on my producer here, make sure he's still breathing. Okay, good. He's breathing. It looks
Thumbs
like.
up. We're good.
Okay,
right.
Very cool, man. Well, Jake, the whole purpose we wanted to have you here is really to talk about this maturation we're seeing, and I know this seems to be a continued theme for us this last couple of months. But why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Jake? And for everybody who doesn't know you, he's probably one of the smartest guys I know in modern office and application of that platform service. But I'll do that little tiny intro, and you can do the rest of it, brother.
All right, we're going to start off with a lie up top, but I'll take it. My name is Jake Humphrey. I'm actually the manager of cloud solutions and professional services for Pax8. So I lead the engineering team that pretty much just works all within modern workplace security, focusing on mail migration, security setups, Intune, Entra ID. I almost called it Azure AD again for the 1000th time, but yeah, focus on that whole space and really kind of help MSPs with that whole maturity side. So really excited to be here and talk more about it.
We are fining you $5 for every time you say Azure AD, AAD, AADJ. Anytime you use any
I'll
of those,
sign my
just so you
paycheck
know.
over right now.
It's fair. We'll just do direct deposit. It makes it seem simpler. So, and Dom, you work with this gentleman. Is that correct as well? Is you get to work with the venerable Jake?
I do get to work with the venerable. For his entire time at Pax8, we've been working together, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
That's pretty nice, which means you have stories about him, I think, that you could even tell potentially.
I think he needs to tell one. And I think we received a request before the show. Something about a dentist that has to be covered. Some murder plot. The people want to know.
I'm fairly certain you were involved in.
Oh, gosh. How much of the story are we telling? Are we going from the beginning, or are we just doing the synopsis?
To the non-disclosure level.
What do the people want?
Yeah. What are the
Cliff Notes was back in March. I was due for a dental appointment. That got canceled on me. I wasn't sure why. Then I found out a few days later, my dentist was on the news, suspected of murder of his wife. And that's been kind of my year of following that whole case. I believe it's currently going through trial. It's been interesting to watch. It's ranged from things of he did this 2 years ago, allegedly did this 2 years ago, and also did things such as Google how to make poison under his personal Gmail account. So it's been a lot of fun to watch. It's been real, real interesting to kind of see some people like that.
What I love is how security conscious you are, Jake, in even the beginning of this conversation, because when we were off camera, his first concern was simply that the guy hadn't taken privacy into play and had not done anything to even use DuckDuckGo or even an in-private browser while searching how to murder my spouse. And I think I just really applaud you, Jake, for having an eye for security and privacy.
But there is a cybersecurity story in that, like your search history is subject to subpoena, that.
That's true.
I mean, try something. You're going to get caught no matter what, but try something.
Yeah.
I don't advocate any of this. I want to maybe come out up top with that. But
MSP Madman wants to know, though, were you able to get your dentist needs taken care of?
I did. It was a very popular thing. I got a lot of messages on LinkedIn after that because I actually talked about that on another YouTube show. And I think I got roughly 50 things like, go to these people. So we actually did get set up with a great one. So yeah, I'm much happier now. They haven't killed anyone that I know of. So
Cam
they're at least using it in private browsing, if nothing else.
Did he patch?
Yeah.
Oh,
I bet he did not patch.
Definitely didn't patch.
Would be my supposition. He was not a patcher. Yeah. He was a poisoner, not a patcher. That's not his jam. I digress.
Wild.
So I'm guessing you're taking up a second hobby now in doing crime podcasting. Is that your thing? You're like,
just
the murderer walks through the
yeah.
courtroom. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I tried to have a whole setup on my office wall in here with red lines and yarn and everything, but it was just the one line that just said
Simple
he probably
mind.
did it.
Yeah.
So
He did it. It's the guy with the search. The guy with the Google search and the order of poison on Amazon.
just said this one
That's
was easy
probably
and
the
crossed it all out. So
And then you didn't know that he actually had gotten a malvertisement, and that was actually a threat actor typing all that on his keyboard.
yeah,
He was just a proxy victim. He didn't do that.
That would have been plausible deniability. Look at that.
That would have been plausible. Yeah.
Loving the term
Let's focus on what we're
malvertising,
really
by the
here
way.
for. Yeah.
Let's talk about
Sorry, go
industry
ahead, Dom.
growth.
Yes.
Matt and I have been talking for, years now about how we're seeing this rapid growth amongst the partners we get to talk to at the shows we go to, and how we get a little bit more challenged each time, right? We're teaching concepts and partners are diving in and asking us the hard questions, which is great. Like that's what we wanted, right? And we're having more mature conversations. But from your perspective, you're seeing what partners are actually asking our team to do, right? Like what they want to do from a tactical perspective. I want to do XYZ with Intune, or I'm worried about this control. So we wanted to have you on to talk about the growth and maturation of that. Because when you and I built these programs in the early days, nobody wanted anything to do with them, right? It was like, why would I implement all this stuff right now? But we're seeing some growth in that. So just to touch, like in general, like how's that trend been?
Yeah, the trend has actually been really awesome. As someone who has worked in the security space for a while, has been working in the modern workplace space for a while, the maturity has been great. I kind of refer to it as a little bit like the COVID catch-up is kind of where we're in right now. Because, when I started doing a lot of this stuff back in January 2020, it was kind of I don't know what Intune is. I don't really care about this. Just get me on 365 email and that's all I want. And then COVID happened, and then that pretty much forced people into rapid adoption. Everyone was working from home. No one had control over it. It became the Wild West almost overnight. So now that, people had gone through all of 2020 and a lot of 2021, even stretching into today, that rapid adoption is now becoming a more mature level. People are saying like, all right, cool. We've had this for a while. We were able to calm this down. We were getting all of our organizations and all of our clients set up with this. Now what? And that's the catch-up period that we're kind of in. And we're seeing some really great stuff. I mean, I think the first in-person event that I did for Pax8, I was getting questions of what is Intune? Like, why would I care about this? Like, this is just Microsoft getting licensing. And it's like, no, it's this. Here's your platform. All the things you wanted to control, this is it. And now we're getting those questions of, hey, I've been running Intune for 2 years. Like, now how do I grow this? How do I make this better? How do I make this work for me? How do I use this as an MSP to make me look better in front of my clients and provide more value? It's been really, really fun to kind of see. I wish it would have come under better circumstances than a pandemic, but the important thing is we're getting there and we're seeing this, and it's making for kind of a stronger landscape overall, in my opinion.
Are you seeing people start to walk away from hybridization as a project now and go straight into full? What would you call it? It's not AADJ, EIDJ. Is that EIDJ? Is it EJ? No, we're doing EJ.
Yeah, whatever. I just follow full cloud adoption. That's kind of the route that I prefer, because they can't take my general terms away from me. Sure. But yeah, we are seeing a lot less like, hey, we have to keep this. We have to keep these on-premise pieces for whatever reasons. And we're seeing a lot more of like, hey, we want to get rid of it. We want to get everything out of the closet. I don't care, what we got to do. Let's just get everything up into the cloud as much as we can. Because we did see a lot of that in 2020 of like, hey, we need to run both. I can't have it just in one spot, but we need to begin the transition. But yeah, so we're seeing a lot more like, I just want to stand alone, because I think it's proven itself. It wasn't just a fun fad that a lot of people like to refer to cloud technology 5-6 years ago. Like, this will die off, this will go away, someone will screw it up, and it'll just be bad. And now it's like, oh, this is where everything is. This is so much better now that I don't have to patch all of my stuff. So now that Microsoft is in control of my mail, like I don't have to worry about patching Exchange for a new vulnerability every 12 minutes. So definitely seeing that full cloud transition.
It's funny you mentioned that. In some of the partners transitioning, I actually had a really interesting conversation. I have a lot of interesting conversations, but with a couple partners in particular who now use that as their competitive advantage, like their onboarding. And I was really feel like I was on the right track when I was running an MSP, because that was our onboarding, was all this crap in your closet's going away. Like that, our first order of business is to get rid of all this crap in your, there's not gonna be any servers, none of that. And we're gonna fully cloudify you. And I actually had trouble, and I think maybe I was too early, but now we're seeing it become a competitive advantage for some of our partners of, no, we're gonna put all this in SharePoint and Teams and maybe AVD if you need desktops, and you're not gonna have any of this crap. So you can work in the office if you want, but you don't have to. You're more secure. So I think this shifts into, I can sell better business outcomes too, right? Not just cybersecurity outcomes if I put you on this central platform for doing all of your work. But this is the game, and we like to poke at people. So we are going to anonymously poke at people real quick.
Okay, fair.
So we dug through pro services requests, right, in preparation for this show, because Jake and I obviously have access to those. We see terms like get around and the minimum we can do. Let's talk about this one. This topic we chose to talk about, because I think, Matt, 2 or 3 episodes ago, I was lamenting about how you and I still get negative feedback when we say thou shalt enable MFA, right?
Yep.
So I'm just going to read how we decided to write it in the run of show, but we got a request on how someone can get around cyber insurance MFA requirements. What's the minimum, and how often can we bypass MFA because users don't like it? I know we're seeing less of that, I want to preface, but like, how much are we still seeing that today?
Unfortunately, more than I like. I would say it's at least once every 3 months. So it has kind of torn down a little bit. It used to be, it seemed like it would almost be every other week. But yeah, we'll still every once in a while get that thing of like, hey, we have this hard cybersecurity requirement. Like, what is the minimum that I can do to make sure that I'm still meeting this, where they can't take legal action against me? Like, if I force MFA, how do I get this so it only triggers once every, I think the record that I had someone ask for me was once a year. There's one MFA trigger per year.
That means I can steal your token and it's
do.
valid for one whole year. Oh my Lord, Jeebus.
I read that request and I immediately thought, like, Matt Lee is screaming somewhere off.
Now, for the record,
inside.
he will not do that for you if you ask us to do that.
We'll thanks, Dom, for clarifying that point. Yeah. I'd like a 1 year token refresh lifetime, and if I can, I want to share one MFA token. Can I just make it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Same as my luggage combo.
Yeah, whenever we do get those requests, we do try to reach out and be like, hey, can we talk about this? Can we make sure that we are understanding this request? I hope that you typed something in wrong and you meant hour instead of year, or just something. But yeah, we'll still get those ones. We still try to get compliance workarounds. I think my favorite one that I got, I think it was 2 months or so ago, was, hey, we just went through an SEC audit. We cleared this. We're not going to go through one for another year. Like, how can we turn these down? Like, what are the controls that we can turn down in the meantime? And then how do we turn them back up for our next audit?
Yeah. Let's turn off that airbag till we need it.
Be insecure and then resecure.
Like the keys in the older cars, you could just click that sucker off. I don't need an airbag right now.
I don't need an airbag right now. Turn it on when you
I really like this. We'll call it what it is, problem. Because you've been doing a lot of work on this, and I'll spoil some news. Services is going through a massive transformation in how and what we offer. And as a part of that, we're really focusing on more enablement content for you partners and for your customers. Point being is, you have a lot of insight from our work together on how do we get users, or how do we help partners really win the hearts and minds conversation about authenticating users. And we dive into the simplicity of modern MFA, and but also how are we evolving, or how have you been evolving your conversations with partners about getting users on board with having MFA? Because that's really what it comes down to, right? It's getting users on board with MFAing, really, hopefully all the time.
Yeah. I've actually kind of just turned the conversation into everybody's everyday life. I'll stick with kind of the MFA conversation specifically. Is I'll just, whenever I have an MSP be like, I don't know how I'm going to pitch this to my users. They're annoyed with a prompt. They don't want to have to do this. And I get it. I get that it can be one step in your way. But, if you look at things that you do on your phone every single day, everybody does banking on their phone. everybody should be doing some form of notification retrieval if you're on an untrusted device. If you're doing something somewhere else where Chase can be like, hey, this is not where you come from. Is this you? And you receive a text message. That's MFA. Weirdly enough, a lot of users don't really put that together because it's not being presented to them that way. Chase is not saying like, hey, we are going to go through this whole MFA prompt. They'll just say, hey, we need to set this up. We need to send you a text message for just extra verification. They don't use terms like multi-factor authentication in a lot of their setup things. So I've actually gone through conversations with partners and MSPs with their clients to just pitch it that way. Like, hey, are you already doing this? Are you already using Chase or Wells Fargo, whomever? Do you receive this when you sign in? And you're just like, well, yeah, it's cool. That's what you'll be doing for this. It's like, oh, okay. I didn't realize this is a thing that's happening in my everyday life. I think that just making sure that conversation is just spinning away from, this is not your company trying to annoy you. This is not your crusty IT guy who's just like, you know what, I'm going to just ruin my user's day today. This is a very important step in just the modern world that everybody's transitioned to. And I think it's just people are a bit more sensitive when it's in their workplace because that hits closer to home for them. Whereas they don't think twice about it for banking or for whatever exchanges they're doing, or even Amazon is doing that. So before you can one day prime order your potassium cyanide for whatever reason, those are the type of things
Not killing my
that
spouse.
you're receiving prompts for.
Yeah, not what it's for.
So
It's for science, damn
just
it.
relating it back to their everyday. And it's just a step that people haven't really taken before. And it sounds silly and it sounds like, well, of course that's the answer. But a good majority of MSPs have told me like, we've never thought to put it in this way. So that's just a nice little rapid adoption.
It's an amazing way to think about it, right? Like make it very human. Because we have a lot of conversations about like, well, make them understand the importance of the data they work with. They don't care, right? Like it's not their data.
They care about the bank because it's their money and it's their dollars and it's their credit card.
Yeah.
That's why it's the care factor. You're not wrong about that, Dom.
You know what else though is I pitched these guys, right? This little FIDO keys here, this YubiKey.
Got mine.
So I plug this in the morning and it's there all day, and I unplug it in the afternoon. And my dance to get into things is that quick. So if you really do have those sensitive customers, take them that direction. Be like, hey, if you don't want push notification, or if you don't want this, we can buy you a $50 key and plug it in, right? So there's a lot of ways to present that. So I wanted to call that out because I think if you're running into friction with customers, you can reframe that conversation and get rid of that friction.
Well, and let's hear that in the chat from people, right? If you're in the chat in either the LinkedIn stream or in the YouTube stream, let me know how you've solved this, or have you solved this? Do every one of your clients have MFA? And then I want you to realize that if you answered yes, you probably just lied to yourself. And the reason is, this is the next question I'm going to ask you, Jake. Are you starting to see more people take their SSO and their MFA that's tied to this single SSO platform and have projects to extend into other SAML applications or OIDC applications? Are you starting to see people adopt the understanding they have an identity provider here, where when they answer that yes, and it touches all the stuff they use? Like, have you done any of those projects? Are you seeing that maturation cycle?
Absolutely. That's actually one of the bigger expansions that we've seen probably in the last, I want to say the last 6 months. I think we've done more SSO style engagements than we have probably my whole time at Pax8. Because again, it's part of this COVID catch up of people like, all right, great. I can now see everything that's here. And so, by the way, did you know people can just sign in just Microsoft? They don't have to sign into everything else that they use, every other application, even some on-premise applications. You set up a proxy and just use it that way. Yep. So people can get out of the, well, I have 9 accounts that all do different things. No, you can have 1 account. And by the way, that MFA token, bingo, that works for that one too. So you don't have to worry about
that. Means for one whole year, you don't have to sign in.
For 1 year, every application is all good. So
I digress.
But yeah, I mean, we've recently done a lot of those because any real application is kind of how I phrase it in a more of an adult context. If it's a real developed application, it is going to have some compatibility. It might not be the most ideal routes, but it's going to be able to be set up. And if it doesn't have that available to be set up through an SSO or SAML or whatever your method you want to go through is, maybe that's the way to start looking into maturing yourselves and being like, well, maybe we shouldn't take this route anymore. Maybe we should look into a competitor. Maybe they aren't offering us what we need to have. So
and
love
hopefully
those
you're about to
transitions.
make my
moving
heart.
LOP apps out of environments for that reason.
Oh, I
Yep.
do too.
Like I genuinely
Absolutely.
enjoyed it. Like that might sound bad, but man, I'd love telling vendors that like you absolutely refuse to implement remotely modern security, and I've exposed that to your customer, who is also my customer. They're leaving you, right?
Yeah.
And I was not shy about why ever. I was like, you could fix this.
Yeah.
Maybe the customer comes back. I don't know, but don't lose your next customer because of this stupid reason. And tangent. Also, don't charge me the enterprise plan just to have single sign-on.
Yeah.
That's
My
not a value add.
SSO.tax for an extra $20,000 this year instead of $2,000. I've played that game before.
Ugh.
Yeah. What's interesting, Jake, so I hope you're about to make my heart like just super happy right now. Like I want to go out of my Friday with like a fat, happy cybersecurity smile on my bearded face. Tell me MSPs are paying you to do SSO integration for their own worlds and their own tools as well, and not just their client requests for SSO. Okay, I can die happy.
Yep.
I'm good.
We're actually getting a lot of repeat people coming back like, hey, our client asked for this. Can you do this for us too? Yeah, absolutely. Not only that, we can show you how to do it. We can show you how to be better with your clients on this, how to talk about it, and then just really be comfortable, because you can't sell something, you can't really offer something if you're not comfortable talking about it. If you're like, yeah, we have this thing and it's Pax8 says it's secure, sure. That's not a confident sell. You gotta use this to your own extent. And we've recently helped an MSP set up about 25 applications of like, oh, we didn't know we could just transition all this. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
that's a key point too.
A lot.
If you've never done an SSO migration for services, one of the biggest things to get right is actually just that, the migration. It's the, how do I take a user database that was all of these users in this local database and now insert an IDP or an identity provider and make them a service provider of this IDP? And does that marry those accounts together? You wind up with some stupid new account and missing data, and ask me how I know. I've played all of those versions before, right? And so a lot of the nuance of doing these migrations is learned the first time you do it. And then as long as you can track that well and do that well, it's a very scalable and repeatable thing. But I'm glad to hear.
So let's talk to app
MSPs
developers for a second then. So if you're going to add SSO, one, don't charge me for it. And I will shout out a company. There's a company called Freshworks, and they make like Fresh Desks and other piece of software. You can buy their or get their free product and turn SSO on. So there is no excuse.
Yeah.
You can do full SAML SSO
awesome.
on their free plan. But I want to point, like, if you're adding that in, think about that, right? All I should have to do as the administrator or the security guy is figure out what sort of user ID elements you want me to map my SSO account. If it's in, I hope it shouldn't be an email address, but it can be. Or do we need to populate user principal names on your side or account IDs on my side? Whatever it needs to be, define that and let me tie everything that user's been doing to just the same identity. Don't make me make new accounts, because we have seen that, and it's a huge turnoff. It makes that customer's journey so much harder. So if you're going to develop,
I'll fix it on the back end. It's the worst statement you can ever make to me.
Oh yes,
we'll fix it on the back end.
Yeah. No.
Oh my Lord.
No, just build it into the damn product, please.
Yeah, you hit such a nerve for me on that one, Dom. Like, I've ruined people's days during SSO migration by making their new data workspace wind up with nothing and have to wait to get it fixed.
Oh, dude.
So yeah,
like a CRM and reassigning all the leads, and like that should not be necessary to turn on SSO. It's not a thing.
Yeah, and even then, to your point, the one that triggered me was somebody had mapped UPN to email and email to UPN, and so they were saying one thing, but it wasn't what they were actually asking for. They were actually asking for the user, and sometimes they're the same, right? So ultimately, sometimes your PN, most of the times your UPN and email are the same. But I happen to be operating in a place at Iconic where we had a UPN for sign-on that was a separate sign-on domain than our actual public email address domain. And so we had to feed the correct one of those two. But it's interesting to see the laziness with which some of them have implemented these mappings, if you will, to your point. But yeah, we got
immutable IDs would be my girls. Like what is not going to change, which is not the email address, by the way. UPNs are great.
Yeah.
Object IDs are fantastic. Emails,
I
might, like my customer might change the format of their email next week because they're growing too big for first name at. So bear these things in mind. If you're an application developer, one, give me SSO out of the gate, right? But two, make it easy to transition into SSO.
Well, Jake, I'm super happy we brought up the fact that MSPs are growing and growing in SSO and starting to do those things themselves and are getting better at talking to their clients. What else you want to chat about? We got a little more time. What else are you seeing in the trenches, man?
Yeah, I mean, other thing I would like to talk about is, we touched on some of the bad requests and some of the funny things that we've kind of heard.
Sure.
It's easy to kind of flow past like the good requests of like
Let's
how,
do it.
we talked about
That's my
people are
jam.
maturing, but like, how are people maturing? Like, what am I seeing with these things? Bigger things that we've been getting asked for is tenant assessments. We've had a lot of people be like, "Hey,
Okay.
we've turned up a lot of this new stuff. We've heard Matt Lee preach stuff at
Sorry
security
about
boot
that.
camps and so on. And we've implemented a lot of it. How do we improve on that? Even like, is there a way to improve? And the answer is always yes. There's always a way to improve. And it's just it's one of those things of it sounds kind of silly, but it's like every time I see one of those requests, I'm like, yes. This is not going to be this is broken. We breached this. This is, whatever. This is, hey, we're good. We're confident where we are, but we want to do better. Just knowing
That's
that
awesome.
growth is not even just reactive, but proactive is an awesome thing to see, and
Well,
I always love hearing people say like, I want to use conditional access more aside from the enforcing MFA or geolocate type of stuff. Like, how can I really put this into use? And oh
I
man,
love it.
people regret
Start to
having
get down
that
that
conversation with me because I'll
zero trust
talk.
conversation, I bet. Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah.
In fact, Anthony Garage, Tony said, if it does not have SSO, we won't deploy the tool or even sell the tool, which is awesome. That's the same conclusion we ultimately got to at Iconic. But he also said, how did we accomplish it? We paid Pax8. So it's a vote for the exact type of projects and type of companies that we were just alluding to, is looking to be better and wanting to figure out where they can harden their environment. And it really does go a long way into due care and into proving that you're iterating upon yourself and growing. And so on those times, are you finding, this may be just a hip gut check, but what percentage are you finding where they had really good stuff in place? And were you finding that you were able to make an impact on all of them in some form or fashion in hardening of that environment?
Yeah, I mean, it's at least 95% we find something of like, hey, this could be tightened up, or you could consider going through these things. But that's also to be expected. Honestly, I would almost expect 100%, at least Neo 99.
Sure.
But we have actually had a couple in the past year where it's been partners we've been super familiar with, and they're coming like, we just want an opinion. We think it's in a good spot. We just want to know. So we ran in, went to assessment, and I had to come back and be like, hey, I did this for you, but you guys are great. Like, only step further would be if you wanted to run zero trust. But if that doesn't work for your environment, if it needs to be a little bit looser than what that is, then you guys are in a phenomenal spot. I couldn't make a recommendation to them based on what they told me of how their business runs, how they do things, and what they need in their day to day. I just had to tell them like, sorry, I would love to tell you, here's the things to fix, but I got nothing for you. So yeah, it's great to see that. But I mean,
go ahead, Dom.
Let's pivot to frameworks for just a second. So I actually gave my friends in marketing a little bit of a scare because, shameless plug, we have a special business premium offer, but like I was writing the content for that offer and I was like, this chunk of stuff you buy covers, these CIS safeguards, and marketing pushed back a little bit. Like, you can't put all the CIS safeguards on a marketing document. I was like, no, that's the point. Like, this is a CIS attached offer. We've been building this relationship with CIS for years. We're making a CIS offer. And it took a minute, but it's taking off, right? And it's right there in the fancy glossy white paper. Here's the CIS controls we're helping with from a technical perspective. I can't help you with policies, just so you guys know. Jake's not going to write you any policies. But, how has that been? And when partners engage with that, are they engaging on the CIS part of that or just the nerdy bits?
Great question.
It's a bit of both. Definitely more on the CIS side, because I think it's a framework that we kind of preach repeatedly. And that was actually another point I was going to kind of hop into, of just like, we are getting a lot more requests around like, hey, I've been learning about these frameworks, and CIS obviously one I fully prefer. But anytime someone says like, I want to just adopt framework X, I'm like, yes. So you're not coming at me with your crazy, this is my idea that I had in a fever dream ideas that I want to have. This is an actual proven point of, I want to start implementing this. And it gives you such a great backbone to work on. And it's just, you don't have to fight tooth and nail. Like, this is why I came up with this. This is why this is Jake's framework. Jake came up with this, and you should do it because Jake's great. It's more of a, no, this is what industries have done. This is what has been proven. This works. It's maybe not be perfect, but hey, this will work for you. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of CIS requests, especially since, again, with that kind of our adoption sides of putting in
Hold on,
actual
Jake.
controls, you can map things out.
Here comes Will.
This is important, man. Hold on. Hey,
Oh,
Wilson,
no.
I'm breaking up. I don't think we're going to have a future together. It seems like enough people out there are willing to talk about CIS that this is getting to a critical mass, and I just had to break it to you personally on the camera. So sorry, Wilson. Okay, Matt, I care about this world. It's fine. It's so good. That's so good. I mean, genuinely, Jake, I didn't know this was going to be – I get to, cancel a whole therapy session tomorrow, y'all. This is so seriously good for me right now.
Maybe just the one, though, just to be safe. Keep the rest
well,
of them.
not a whole slew of them. Yeah, we don't want to wind up searching for cyanide on Amazon. But no, I'm so excited about that, Dom. I think you set that question up just to trigger me. But I'm glad that MSPs themselves are adopting frameworks in general, not just CIS, although that happens to be the one I scream constantly, yes. But really, it's frameworks in general and the ability of exactly what you said. Stop having fevered dreams of what you think security is, and let's start as a dang industry and communicating what we all agree is security and move forward with that. And if the framework sucks, fine, fix the framework. But let's stop all shooting from the hip. Let's stop all being the smart guy or gal in the room. And let's start actually moving towards what is psychology, what is security, and hell, maybe psychology, right? Anyways, you got me triggered on that. I'm so excited to hear that, Jake. That's awesome.
I want to call out to Positive Energy 347, and I still don't know who you are. So, if you want to DM me,
I still haven't figured that out. Yeah, tell me who it is.
Let me send you a T-shirt or something because you contribute so much to the show.
Yeah, for sure.
They mentioned, we require all users to SSO and through N365, so we are seeing that adoption. And shout out to MSP vendors. We're seeing a lot more MSP software companies come out with single sign-on type features, right? So just wanted to call that out.
Very cool. All right, Jake, we're down to those final couple minutes in this thing. It's the last chance you might get to talk positively about the growth of MSPs in your world. What do you got for us, brother? Bring it home.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we'll just kind of go with just a couple of the pointers that we kind of had here is find a framework. Again, really love CIS. That's my recommended one that I like to kind of preach as well. Start IG1 and just build. But find something. That way you're not getting into a new environment, and you just have to be like, what do I do? Where do I start? Where should I throw a dart at something and start implementing? It's like, no, that'll give you your place to begin. And then it'll give you your place to grow. So you start IG1 and then you say, cool, let's move upward. I am very much with everybody else of just do MFA. It's weird that it's still an argument nowadays, but just do it. just simply put, and as doom and gloom as it can sound with a lot of these type of things that we're seeing in the news of it seems like there's something new every week. You guys started the show with here's some new things. I personally do see the landscape improving. It might not seem like it because we're seeing a lot of this crazy stuff happen. It's not improving everywhere. But in the MSP space, we're seeing partners be much more proactive. We're seeing people better.
But I'll counter that because I think we're seeing more scary. I was talking about critical infrastructure and healthcare and finance.
Yeah.
I would wager that there's a chance that we're seeing more big boy attacks because the little guy attacks are getting a little bit more difficult, right? So
sure,
maybe we're targeting less volume and more quality. If we're today's threat actor. I mean, I don't know any threat actors personally. I think Teacup's still going to come find me someday, but
Teacup's coming. Teacup's coming.
I do think that there is a chance that maybe if we keep maturing the bottom end, it'll force the top end to mature a little more.
Yeah. I could see that, but along with it, I mean, there were always these big boy attacks, as you call them, on top of the growing small attacks. Every week, Exchange will open up a new vulnerability. Now we're getting the point of, cool, you're running Office 365. That's not around as much anymore. So it's we are seeing the larger attacks become more sophisticated, but we've been seeing that over time anyways. But if we can start limiting how many small attacks are available, then it just, in my opinion, kind of improves the landscape, but it's definitely open to discussion. So
I mean, if people patch their stuff and do MFA and train their users. This is all basic IG1 type stuff. You're being silly over here there, Jake Humphrey. No, I completely agree, and I think it's a great way to close the show out. Jake, I want to check back in with you again and see what your changes in the industry look like as you're seeing it from the trenches, and maybe we can come in with some more of the quotes, and they're all positive. But I do want to say thank you, and as we get close to ending this year, thank you to all the dang MSPs out there fighting this fight. This came on you quick. This is a change that you didn't expect. And I would just say personally from my heart, and it was quite warmed today by the 70 people that decided to show up for my kickoff meeting for a working group session. I'm just very warmed in where we are heading, and I'm glad to be fighting this fight with y'all. So thanks for being on the game with us, Jake, and thanks for being here. Dom, close us out.
Jake, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a fantastic show. Really great insights. I really hope that when we check in again, this trend is continuing. That is our show for the week. Thanks so much for all of the engagement today. Next week, we're going to have Robin Harris actually on the show, not just a novel upset.
Nuts.
She's going to join us on the show. I'm really excited for this conversation. We're going to talk about some security and compliance nightmares and perhaps some good stories. So
yeah,
I'm really excited for that episode. That'll be next Friday. Don't forget to catch all the other Pax8 live shows, and we'll see you next week.